Hello everyone, welcome to our Egyptian online seminar group. First, because of the new public questions you can ask our speaker during his presentation or after his presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming dear Professor Theophanis Stratopoulos. Theophanis Stratopoulos is a professor of accounting at the School of Accounting and Finance, University of Waterloo. His research focused on the stakeholders' implications of technology-enabled business strategy and emerging technology. He has published in top-ranking journals, including the Accounting Review, Journal of Management Information System, Journal of Information System, Information and Management, Journal of Strategic Information System, Accounting Horizon, and International Journal of Accounting Information System. Now we will start our seminar with the Professor Theophanis Stratopoulos.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to present my work. The title of the paper that I will present is It's Tech-Powered Sustainability, the IT and Environmental Performance Nexus. It is a project that has been covered with Russell Barber, Stephanie Walton, and Ian Zhang. I'm Theo Stratopoulos, and we're going to move on with an overview of the paper that I will be presenting. The problem that we are dealing with is the fact that there is an implicit assumption within the business community that there is a link between information technology and sustainability. However, there is no empirical evidence to support this belief. The concept that we're going to introduce in this paper is the idea of the IT capability, motivated by the literature on the productivity paradox. The point that we're making is that it is the integration of digital resources that makes a difference rather than the IT spending. So we introduce the concept of IT capability, and we examine the effect of IT capability, or the association to be exact, between IT capability and environmental performance. We use different measures of environmental performance, primarily coming from Refinitiv Icon. We use a data set of 14,000 plus firm year observations from the period of 2010 to 2020. The main finding is that there is a positive association between IT capability and environmental performance. However, this effect is weakened by two factors, the rebound effect and the technological determinism. We have done lots of robustness check to make sure that our results are holding, and we have recently introduced a causality test that I will present. It's kind of like, you will notice it's been added as a last component in the paper. The paper makes contribution to academic literature in terms of studies focusing on what drives environmental performance, and we think making a contribution by introducing the information technology, and of course it has business and regulatory type of implications. Okay, so I mentioned earlier to Muhammad that you can stop me at any time if you have any questions, and the reason that I introduced this kind of overview, because in Waterloo, when we have people coming to present at our seminar, people starting asking questions right from the beginning, from the title slide page. So I created this kind of overview, so this way, if you want to stay a little bit longer on any aspect of the paper, at least have a big picture of what's the objective and what are the deliverables of this study, all right? So the motivation behind this study. I was reading Information Week, and I came across this article in 2023, and basically, what this article is talking about is that companies who have what's called an IT capability or invest in information technology will have a better environmental performance And they take it a step further, saying that companies who create this kind of connection, they also create a virtuous cycle of investing more in terms of information technology. So I thought that was quite interesting. And I started reading into the literature to see what kind of evidence can I find. And when I was reading the literature on environmental performance, I came across the Friedman versus Freeman type of debate, stakeholders versus shareholders, and the fact that in more recent years, companies and executives start paying attention to stakeholders. And stakeholders, they want their companies. We want our companies to care about the environment because we know, we see it on day-to-day life that our environment is changing and we need to do something. In addition to this, there is an extensive literature that's talking about the implications of firms who pursue sustainability. So that they can reduce costs, they avoid regulation, they attract talent, etc. So there are a lot of reasons why a company will be interested in achieving higher environmental performance, right? That was the first takeaway that I got from the literature. But then as I continue reading, I realized that, boy, this is a mess. If you are if you see environmental performance from a company standpoint, trying to measure the performance of your company, because obviously you cannot improve your performance if you don't know what you're measuring, it was a nightmare. There are 230 different sustainability standards, which means the bottom line is that there is huge uncertainty from the company's standpoint, from a management standpoint, in terms of what we need to do to improve sustainability performance. And this leads to the next step. What do you do when you are in an environment of high uncertainty? Galbraith, the classic studies say that you invest in information technology. So it cannot make sense what I was reading, the background, that yes, if you're in an environment of high uncertainty and you want to improve your environmental performance, you're going to make investments in information technology. So going back to the article that I mentioned from Information Week, that makes perfect sense, correct? But then you continue reading and you realize that the story is not as simple as it was originally presented, because there are two competing views. On the one side, you have the optimistic view that says that, hey, technology will solve all the problems. I had a bunch of quotes that, if you want, can find from the news. We're talking about how, especially now with AI, how we're going to optimize our way to achieve net zero in terms of environmental implications, right? So the optimistic view is consistent with the point that I mentioned in the very beginning, that IT investments will improve environmental decision-making and, by extension, environmental performance. But there are a couple of things that we need to consider. I call them the reality check. The first one is the rebound effect. And the rebound effect says that any efficiency gains that we achieve because of better technology are counterweighted by the fact that demand is increasing exponentially. And you have seen the headlines about how the data centers that we're building has forced a lot of companies, I'm talking primarily in North America, to go back and start using coal, because the clean source of energy are not enough to cover the growing demand of these data centers. So the rebound effect is that I'm not sure whether technology will really solve our problem. The second issue is what we call the technological determinism. And technological determinism goes to this kind of mindset that if I am a manager of a company and I believe that technology will fix the environmental problems, I have no incentive to do anything. I have no incentive to take actions within my company to solve this kind of problem, correct? Because, hey, sooner or later, technology will solve the problem. So you see that come to the point where it's not clear, will technology help or hurt the environmental goals? Okay. And to put it more specifically, in the context of our study, the question that we are asking is that do firms with stronger IT capabilities actually achieve better environmental performance? That's the main research question that we introduced in our study, okay? I mentioned before that we are using, it's a large-scale empirical study. We introduce IT capability as we create an index that measures IT capability. And the extra thing that I have added in this presentation is not in the paper version that we have yet, is the one we introduce evidence of causality using a regulatory shock that came up in 2016. All right. So this is the general idea, research question. And the next topic is that the IT capability framework. What do we mean when we're talking about IT capability or digital capability or digital strategy, whatever you want to call it? The idea comes from the productivity paradox literature. And for those of you who are not familiar with the productivity paradox, it is centered around the idea that investments, how much you spend in information technology, does not necessarily guarantee a better performance. So this literature came up with the idea that how you invest in information technology matters. And when we're talking about how you invest in information technology, we're talking about your company's IT capability or digital capability, which means how you integrate these resources together. And the resources that we think that they are relevant in the context of environmental performance are, for example, the resources that the company is having. Whether when we're talking about resources, we're talking about your budget, and one of the biggest items in your budget is going to be the ERP system. If you are serious about your environmental performance, and given the high level of uncertainty associated with generating a report related to environmental performance or monitor your environmental performance, an ERP system will be critical because you need combined resources from many different areas of your company, okay? So IT resources is an important component that will drive environmental performance. The company's better decisions that can lead to better environmental performance. There's a strategic aspect is that there is an extensive literature that's talking about senior executives. Their experiences, their background are an important driver, a driver that defines how the company is using information technology. So the CEO, CFO, CIO presence, they've been documented in the literature that they contribute to how the company leverages the strategic integration of technology within the company. And as part of the IT resource, also the IT staff, there was a recent study that was published in the CAR, was talking about the level of the IT staff that the company is using. The rank and file IT employees of the company is another important contributor. So what we do for the context of our study, we use principal component analysis to create a composite index of all these attributes. And that's what we call the IT capability of the company. Having established the IT capability, now the next topic becomes what are the theoretical predictions of our model? In other words, what are our research hypotheses? And at a high level, our main hypothesis says that companies that have higher IT capability will achieve better environmental performance because they can leverage, they can collect information, all the information that they need to monitor in order to make decisions that will help them improve and minimize their environmental footprint. And therefore, the argument that we're making is that we expect a positive association between IT capability and environmental performance. As I mentioned in my introduction, there are two counter effects that we need to consider. The first one is the rebound effect. And by the way, the rebound effect has been introduced since the Industrial Revolution. We call it rebound effect now, but I think James back in 1800 was talking about the idea that when we improve efficiency and we have more people who end up consuming our services, so in the end, we use more resources. So the bottom line here, and I mentioned the example about the data centers before, is that yes, we have technology which is more efficient, but if the number of people who are using the technology is increasing by an order of magnitude higher than the efficiencies that we are achieving, we are not going anywhere close to net zero. And that was one of the comments that was made by the CEO of Microsoft. They say that they had a moonshot to achieve net zero by, I think, 2030. And they said that, and when they started introducing the data centers, the AI data centers, they said that our moonshot has become further away. They realize, a lot of companies realize that the rebound effect has started kicking in, and it's not likely that we're going to achieve our goals. So if this is the case, the companies who have an IT capability, their ability to achieve better environmental performance will be weakened by the rebound effect, by the amount of technology that they are using, right? The other factor that I mentioned before is technological determinism, and technological determinism is the fact that if you feel, if your mindset is such that you believe that technology will solve our problems, then you're less likely to take any actions to improve the environmental performance of your company. And this is something that will weaken the results that we're talking about. Moving further down, the sample and measures we use for our analysis are coming primarily CompuStat for financial data, Aberdeen CI Technology Database for information related to IT spending, IT staff, ERP adoption within the company, Refinitiv Icon for environmental measures, and Board EX for information about the background of senior executives like CEO, CFO, and CIO of the company. Some sample statistics. We have that the environmental score, the main measure that we use for our analysis, is measured on a scale of 0 to 100, and the average is 36.1%. The IT capability index, it is a composite index that I mentioned, and you will see in the next slide, generated through principal component analysis. It has an average value of 1.75 and standard deviations of 0.43. We have the percentage of CEO and CFO who have an IT background, and this contributes positively in the IT capability, but it's also a factor that we use to define technological determinism. Whether the company has a CIO, 58% of companies have CIO these days, and we're dealing with relatively large and profitable companies. The IT capability, the way that we create it is by performing principal component analysis on all IT-related measures, and we use a weighted average of the first 5 principal components to measure our IT capability. Collectively, they cover 93.4% of the variability of these measures. As an additional metric, we use the first principal component. So in all of the results, you will see that we have the weighted average plus the results based on the first principal component. We're using 2 econometric models. The first one is that we use to measure the main effect. The second one we use to measure the moderation effects, in other words, the rebound effect and the technological determinism. So this area here is where we capture the moderation effect. Our dependent variable is the log of an environmental score. Our moderators are IT intensive for companies that have an information technology footprint in terms of IT budget and ERP, which is above the industry median. For the technological determinism, we look at the subset of firms. Both of them are binary variables. And for the technological determinism, we measure using the IT executive and takes the value of 1 if the company has a CEO and a CFO with a technological background, technological education, training, experience. These are the metrics that we're using. Okay. Fixed effects, standard errors are the commonly used methodology for this kind of analysis. The main results, and by main results, I'm talking about model number 1, testing our first hypothesis. And we see that the coefficient is 0.0791, statistically significant. And since this is a semi-log model, the 0.791, if you convert it into percentage point and express it in terms of standard deviations, it is 3.54%. What this means, if a company increases its IT capability by 1 standard deviation, the environmental performance will increase by 3.54%. So there is the economic effect, positive support for our first hypothesis. And remember, I was telling you that we have repeated the analysis using the first principal components. The results are consistent for this one. Our next set of results is for the moderating effect. And we ran the model, the second model that I shared with you, where we're looking at the interaction between IT capability and the IT intensive companies. This is the 2A, in order to test for the rebound effect. And remember, we're expecting a negative effect. In other words, the rebound effect, if the company is IT intensive, it will limit its ability. It will limit its environmental performance. The result is negative and statistically significant, which means that the benefits that the company achieves through IT capability will become weaker for IT-intensive companies. Results are shown here using the main measure and the PCI effect is here. We repeated the same analysis for technological determinism by doing the interaction between IT capability and executives. Again, we expect negative results, and the analysis confirms that the context matters. In other words, companies where the IT executives are likely to exhibit technological determinism will weaken the effect of IT capability on environmental performance. There are several studies in the environmental performance literature that said that there are different ways of measuring environmental performance. So the results that I've shown you in the previous screen were based on the main metric, the aggregate metric. In addition to this, we examine the emission reduction, the ability of the company to perform green innovation, and the ability of company to leverage its resources. All of these three metrics, the higher the value, the better the environmental performance of the company. And what we found is that in terms of emission reduction and resource use, IT capability there is a positive association between higher IT capability and these two variables. We did not find anything in terms of green innovation, and perhaps we've had some speculation in the paper, but we're not sure exactly why. It's not statistically significant. Another way of measuring IT environmental performance is based on emission types. Scope 1, the direct emissions that the company is generating. Scope 2 is the energy the company is buying from public utilities. And Scope 3 is the extended value chain. In other words, the emissions were generated by your suppliers, where you bought your products from, and down by the customers who are going to buy your product. The result that we found, it was the direct one. IT capability has an effect on Scope 1 emissions. And our interpretation is that when you develop your IT capability gives you the ability to control what's going on within your company. So you can take better decisions within your company. You have no control about the energy that your public utility is using, and have less control on your suppliers and your customers, right? So it makes sense that the results will be positive, the results will be significant, and indicate that the company with higher IT capability will be able to reduce its direct emissions, but non-significant effect for Scope 2 and for Scope 3 doesn't seem to be significant, and it kind of makes sense, all right? The next thing that we examined are additional robustness checks. So what other tests did we do? We use ASSET-4 environmental score. Replicated the analysis, the results are consistent. The environmental subcategories I have already shown you, they're significant for emission reduction and resource use, but not for innovation, so overall significant. We did change analysis. In other words, what if change in IT capability will have an impact on the change on environmental performance? The results are consistent. We did a placebo test, and in kind of this slide shows the results of the placebo test. The results are consistent. In other words, if we randomly generate data for ID capability and we replicate the models thousands of times, will the results show anything? And the placebo test shows that there is no false effect. Alternative measures, I mentioned that we use the PC1 and it's robust. Overall, the result seemed to be robust, but the part that is missing, and the part that was raised in last time when I presented this paper, was the idea of causality. In other words, primarily, our analysis established an association by looking at the level and possibly reverse causality by looking at differences, but we didn't have something to address the possibility of causality. So my colleagues suggested, and we examined the effect of regulation SK, S-K. In April 2016, SEC introduced the regulation S-K, and the SEC opens the regulation to comments from stakeholders, companies who have to file this kind of reports, or accounting firms who have to help their companies create this kind of reports. They started providing comments. Within, I believe, 90 days, which is the period when it's open for comments, there were over 25,000 comments, which means that stakeholders pay attention to environmental performance, right? Now, the current administration in the States may not think that this is important, but personally, I feel that environmental issues are still relevant. And thankfully, a lot of companies, they continue paying attention to their environmental performance. In other words, they have not rolled back environmental initiatives. So this kind of situation served as our natural experiment. We used the period 25 to 2016 as the period where there was relatively lower pressure to generate environmental disclosures. And we think that 2017, 2018 is the period as indicated by the regulation, the comments and the discussion generated around regulation S-K, that it shows the highest reporting demand. So the analysis that we're doing is that two firms with increased IT capability have better environmental performance, right? That's kind of like the treatment. So we did this kind of analysis, and we repeated for the three environmental variables for which we found significant results: the main environmental score, emission reduction, and resource use, right? And as you can see, positive effect, statistical significant, for the main environmental performance metric. The economic effect is about 10.7%. Second highest impact on research use. The economic effect is about 5.2%, and I would say marginal effect on emission reduction. So this is the new component that I mentioned that we added in the paper to strengthen the importance and the findings of our analysis. So we're moving to the last component, so you can have some opportunity for questions. The academic contribution is that we feel that the major contribution comes in terms of the intersection between technology and environmental performance literature, because we introduce IT capability as a driver of environmental performance. Sorry. The other contribution is we look at the technological determinism as something new that has not been considered in general in the technology or in the accounting literature. From an empirical standpoint, we generated a composite index of IT capability by combining resources, expertise, etc. The causality analysis using the SEC regulation. Was an interesting setup, natural experiment. They introducing the two boundary conditions. I think we believe it's another interesting contribution of our research. Managerial implications. The main point that we want to pass to managers is that technology is not a panacea. By itself, it's not guaranteed that will solve our problem. So we encourage any managers who may come across our study to stay focused and make sure you take measures to improve the environmental performance of the company. Because technology by itself would not be the solution to the problem. And of course, for investors, to the extent that they are interested, IT capability works as a proxy for companies with better environmental performance. Policy implications, we think that the results around SEC are very significant, and we hope that SEC and regulators will continue pushing companies and developing regulations for companies to report environmental performance. Limitations. I mentioned at the very beginning when I was starting all the examples about the AI data centers and what they do to our environment. So certainly a limitation that our results stop before the boom of AI, but to be honest, I'm like, in order to do this kind of analysis, we'll have to wait a couple of more years to see what happens in order to have enough data to do this kind of analysis. Other areas where we could examine, primarily the companies are US companies. It would be nice to see what happens, replicate this study with other companies from other parts of the world. And recently there was a study published in the Accounting Review talking about using blockchain to track Scope 3 emissions. It will be interesting to see if companies start using it on how, what might be the effect of the IT capability of Scope 3 emissions. So in conclusion, we have that there is a positive association between IT capability and environmental performance. The effect is weakened by the rebound effect, by increased consumption, and by the mindset of executives. Bottom line is that IT capability will work, but going back to the message that we got from the productivity paradox, you need to integrate it strategically in order to be able to see the results that you're hoping to achieve. So I may have moved a little bit too fast, but that was in part intentional because I wanted to give some time to see if you have any questions. So, Mohammed?
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Professor Theophanis, for your contribution and your effort. It's really an excellent presentation and excellent paper. Thank you very much. Now, if anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. I think Lanju can ask. You have a question?
Yeah, hi, Theo. It's Lan here. Sorry, I maybe be able to turn on my mic as well. I guess I had two questions, and I typed in the chat. I don't do this type of research, so forgive me if my questions are totally nonsense. The first question I had was like, usually I think when you do principal component analysis, you don't consider factors that have eigenvalue of lower than 1. But I noticed that you have like at least two or three factors have quite low eigenvalues. That's one question. And the other one, I guess it has to do with H2A. I feel it's just part of H1 in that H2A basically is saying that the effect of IT capability is reduced when the level of IT capability increases, right? It's kind of a curvilinear relationship instead of a linear relationship.
Okay. Now, for the principal component analysis, remember that all of the results that I have presented are based on the weighted average, but we also repeated them with just the first principal component. The results are consistent.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For the second question, can you help me? Can you repeat your question to make sure that
Yeah, I guess I mean the way you tested is I think I can follow, but I think at the theoretical level, H2A is basically saying that H1, what you propose in H1 is a nonlinear effect. So you may have marginal, like a return. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just saying maybe the effect of IT capability on environmental performance is nonlinear, is curvilinear.
Okay. I can
mention like a
go
rebound.
back. Yeah, we can. I can certainly go back and ask my co-author does the empirical analysis to test for quadratic.
Maybe quadratic. Yeah, some kind of linear.
But the way that we designed the IT intensive, it does not, IT intensiveness does not use all the factors used to create the IT capability.
I see.
If I go back, let me see if I can find the slide that I want to use. Okay. The technological IT intensity is based on these two variables. It does not use all of them. And technological determinism is using these two variables. It doesn't use the rest. But it's a good point. I'm like, you would expect that company that has higher technological determinism and higher IT intensity will also, in other words, a company that combines both, it's likely to be a company that has a higher IT capability in terms of where we measure it. So that's a very good point. We need to go back and see whether the point that you make is, I'm like, it's worth exploring.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Christina?
Hi. I mean, I listened to your very nice paper. Thank you very much. Very, very useful for me. I just, wanted to ask you, to actually give some suggestions, really. First of all, I remember that, at some point, the US has joined the Paris Agreement, then withdrew, and then, so I was wondering whether these exogenous shocks, could really give more texture to your research design. That's the first one. The second is, you focus on IT capability, and that's terribly interesting. But I have a sense that it is not just a matter of IT, it's more STEM, capability, like the corporate governance is more fluent into engineering and this type of sciences. Yeah, that's the two comments. And I have another question, but yeah, What do you think?
When we're trying to figure out, I brought back the slide about addressing causality,
Yeah,
and the Paris Agreement was something that we considered,
yeah.
but the,
It didn't work.
no, we did not try it
Okay.
because US joined the Paris Agreement, exited with when Trump
Yeah,
came in power, joined again with Biden came in, and are
yeah.
out again. We didn't think that was a clear story for us to follow.
Okay.
I'll go back. I'm like, we had conversations whether we should use the Paris Agreement because that was the first
Yeah, first
choice. I'm
instinct.
like, it seems like an obvious choice, but
Yeah,
we decided to go with regulation SK because we had more kind of, it's a more well-contained example
okay.
scenario for in the context of doing the empirical analysis. I don't know, maybe we should go back and reconsider the Paris Agreement, but I'm not sure where do we introduce the cutoff points.
Mm.
Is the cutoff point when the Paris Agreement is introduced, when US signs it, when US exits? You have so many different points
Yeah,
which are not clear and will kind of complicate the
yes,
analysis. We
yes.
felt that regulation SK with all this kind of supporting evidence, and especially if we contain it within the 4 years that we consider, provides kind of like a more robust type of scenario. Sorry, you
Yeah.
had one more question? What?
Yes, I mean, definitely, I understand the difficulty because also you're dealing with annual, data. So it's much easier if you work with, let's say, monthly returns, right?
Yeah.
The second one is, the wider, capability, not just IT, but engineering and, related science capability.
The way that we define the technology CEO, let me go find the slide so I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay. The way that we define IT expertise for the CEO and the CFO, basically what we're doing is to look at their education. If they have STEM education,
Yeah.
we consider this as tech background. So implicitly, it's kind of capturing what you're talking about.
Yes.
In other words,
Totally.
if you have a lot of people on the board, CEO, CFO, and who are both from a STEM background, they're more likely to have this kind of technological determinism type of mindset. And that's how we measure technological determinism, like exactly the STEM background. In addition to this, besides education, we have added whether the CEO or the CFO has prior experience working for a technology company. It's kind of introduce similar type of mindset.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally. Yes. I mean, I was, my mistake because I was confused by the IT and say, well, no, but, very well done. Thank you so much. Finally, a question on the Aberdeen CI technology database. Is it a database that, it is publicly available or it needs to be purchased?
It's very expensive.
Oh, okay. All right
Yes.
then. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't, in my school, we don't have it. One of my co-authors, they have that there. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
You're welcome. Paul?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I'm just going into the interaction term. I've got the paper in front of me.
Okay.
It's interesting that the two-way interaction term is a negative sign and significant, which means that either the intensive or the executive does not have a main effect. And therefore, would you consider them as mediators or moderators? In your conceptualizing of these variables, on the ultimate dependent variable. Because I'm thinking part of the story is already, I think, from the first question about the principal component analysis, and therefore the loading that goes into the factor loadings, and whether one or more dimensions is loaded higher with the weighting, therefore driving the main effect. And number two, when the two-way interaction term kicks in, the other main effects which are not significant, would you conceptually consider them or empirically test them to be either mediators or moderators? I'm just going to mute now so I can hear you more clearly. Thank you.
Whoa, Paul, stay a second, because I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, now when you have interaction terms on your slide, are they significant?
That's what we're looking on my slide right now, correct?
Yep, correct.
So we're looking at this column.
Yep.
This is the interaction term you're talking about?
Yep. Yep.
So it is significant and negative.
And now go up a little bit, what I call the main effect term, the independent variables. Are they significant or not?
The
IT intensive
it's not significant.
is not significant.
That's
Therefore, it does not have a main effect, but the interaction term indicates that the IT intensive, would have a mediating or a moderating role on performance. That's what interaction term and main effect differences happen to indicate.
So, you know something? I'm stumped. I don't think that I can give you a quick answer on this one. I'll have to think about this.
Yeah, I mean, just what I'm saying. If the main effect was significant and the interaction term was not, it meant that IT intensive and IT capitalization interacting together had no effect. So in other words, IT intensive was absolutely not a main effect or a interaction term. But the moment the interaction term kicks in significantly, in the second equation on the second column, it's IT cap and IT executive. Now, the sign being different means you can do a high-low split and see whether there's a crossover. That'll tell you whether it's a moderator or a mediator. There's some other functional forms of testing, if I'm not mistaken, from interaction terms. I just saw the result and I go, that's very interesting.
As I said, I have to go back and think about this. It's
cool. Thank you so much.
It's very interesting, and I confess that it didn't enter our conversation. So it's certainly I have to go back and think about this.
Are there other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. I see a question in the chat. Muhammad, you can open your mic.
Thank you.
Muhammad, I cannot hear you.
Muhammad, your sound is not clear. I not. Can you hear me, Muhammad?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes.
You hear me? Can you hear me?
Your sound. Could you please raise your voice?
Can you hear me right now? Hello.
I'm sorry, the sound is not clear.
I think he put his questions in the chat. He asked in the chat, is corporate sustainability moderated by regulator affairs of the country?
Okay, that's something that I mentioned in as the suggestions for future research. Our study is limited within US. So in order to be able to test for the country effect, we need to have more than one country. And the causality effect, it captures a change a little bit in regulation, but I would not argue that it answers your question.
Are there other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your questions. Thank you very much, dear Professor Sivaros, for your contribution and your effort. Thank you, everyone, join us today. Thank you very much for taking the time to present it to us today. It has been appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mohammed, for the opportunity. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope to see you soon in Egypt. You are very, very welcome.
Yes.